Okay. Woo woo. Welcome to the blue collar lunch pail half hour. We're going to try this again. Woo woo. We're having some technical problems. I need to call the IT guy. Anyway, welcome to lunch pail half hour. We're talking about mental toughness today. We're the ones who use blue collar. Our favorite tool is a shovel. I actually was an electrician. My favorite tool was not a shovel, but it sounds good for this freaking little lunch pail half hour. Woo woo. So anyway, today I think we're talking about mental toughness. Okay. All right. There's some questions already starting to pop up. Jesse is here. Woo woo. Jesse, that freaking paragraph is moving up, so that's good. Okay. It says, how do you personally define mental toughness? For me, mental toughness, how I define it is that you don't get, I don't know, I'm really tough about it. You don't get stopped, man. Mental toughness means you're out there, you're pushing through pain. In my events that I do, the extreme endurance, you're pushing through pain. You're pushing through, sleep deprivation. You're pushing through, negative thoughts. Nothing stops you, period. You're pushing through bad weather, storms, extreme heat, extreme cold. You're always pushing, always pushing, always pushing. You push till you're like, I don't know, it's like you're just this side of like, could be dying, but you push right till then. That's mental toughness. You're just always out there pushing, pushing, pushing. You don't take any excuses. No excuses. You're just freaking going. Another question about mental toughness? So anyway, yeah, so like when I'm in my events, okay, here you go. What's the first step someone should take to become mentally tough? I think you build your mental toughness up, man, is what you got to be willing to stay in the game longer than you normally would. I remember when I first started doing the extreme endurance and I was starting to run, and I would go like I just couldn't run more than an hour. I could not run more than an hour. I felt like I needed to like take a break and sit down at an hour and it was a big deal when I started running past an hour. And then pretty soon I got to 2 hours. I go, oh, I could run 2 hours without stopping, I mean, I'd walk a little bit and have a goo, at the hour or something, but I was able to keep moving. And I got finally to where I ran 100 miles and 200 miles. But it all started out, I remember, I just can't go past an hour, man. I was like, I had this mental break that, I couldn't run past an hour without I don't know, I guess I would sit on my ass and take a little break. This was before I started doing any racing. And then I got to where, finally where I'm getting to where I can run for days and, and keep moving. I'm just on my feet and it's just mentally in your brain, it's just telling you no matter what's going on, you just keep moving, What's the first step someone should take to become mentally tough? I think it's just, you're taking on whatever challenges you have and you're staying in the game longer, man. You're pushing through whatever obstacle there is. And that's what keeps making you more mentally tough, is that you keep pushing. So you got your comfort zones right here, little circle around you that you're comfortable with. Maybe it's like me, it was like running an hour I could do. And then when I started going more than that, I was going out of my comfort zone and I had to build up mental toughness to go further than an hour. and you just these repetition is what builds mental toughness. You're doing the same thing over and over again, going into that nerves, going into that pain, going into your fear, whatever your fear is, and you just keep doing it. I remember when the first time I tried to swim the English Channel, it was so freaking rough. When I went out there, it was crazy. To this day, I've tried 5 times to swim the channel. That was the roughest I ever been in. It was like just, the waves were just slamming me. I could barely tell which way was up. And I'd only really swam in San Francisco Bay and in Aquatic Park. I'd never really even swam outside of Aquatic Park before I went that first time. So it's pretty protected, you know what I mean, relative to a freaking big wave slamming you all over the place and the boats pitching back and forth. I didn't even want to get too close to the boat. I thought it would knock me out, And it was like, and the girl who was on my, on my crew then, the woman who was on my crew, she told me afterwards, she's from England. I picked her up, over there. I guess she volunteered. And she goes, Bill, most people when they swim the English Channel don't have fear in their eyes the whole time. You had fear in your eyes the whole time. And so I go, I know, I'd never been in that rough of water before. And so I came back, and then I would jump in San Francisco Bay, probably mostly in Aquatic Park because I don't have to have a boat with me there. You can just do it unsupported. And it would jump in, but every time it was windy or rough. And by the time I'd be in there and I went in one time, it was so bad. It was like nobody was swimming, just me and a couple other guys. And the waves were breaking over the pier. And I went out because I go, this is big. This will really get me mentally tough. And I went out there and I took it on. And I remember thinking that this is and it was I just kept doing that. And I did it for a whole year straight. I was jumping out whenever it was real rough, real windy. And it made me tougher, man. When I went back out, when I did my 5th attempt, and it was almost as rough as that first one, I got separated from the boat by a storm. It was whitecaps everywhere, and I lost the boat. And the woman who was on my crew that time, I said, she said, Bill, you never had fear in your eyes at all. You were calm the whole time. So that's just because I kept getting in rough water over and over and over and over again until I was mentally tough enough that I could relax in the cold water. So that's what I'm encouraging you to do. If you want to get mentally tough, you need to do it over and over and over. Take on whatever that challenge is that's making you so nervous, that makes you nervous, and you keep working at it, Or if it's like running, you go a little further each time, and you get more mentally tough that it's hard to go out. Like I was trying to swim a 6-hour swim to qualify for the English Channel, and I hadn't swam more than 2 hours all year. You know what I mean? It had been the water had been really cold in San Francisco Bay, and I really just didn't have enough swimming in to be able to swim a 6-hour swim. So I would go out. I knew, I could do 2, but I didn't have the mental toughness to go to 6. It's like you got to do steps. So I'd go to 3 and then to 4, and then maybe from 4 I could go to 6. But I needed to do kind of baby steps to get up there. I couldn't just mentally jump from 2-hour swim to a 6-hour swim in 58 degrees in San Francisco Bay. It was just, I wasn't strong enough mentally to do that, So this stuff is it's just taking steps and staying on it. Let's see what else we got here for another question. What is the toughest endurance event you've done, and what did it teach you mentally? I don't know. Whatever I do is the toughest. It's whatever I'm doing at the time. It's always the toughest, I mean, literally, like when you're swimming, I've swam for, almost 12 hours in the English Channel, and, and got separated from the boat. And, that's like mentally tough. When you're swimming in cold water and you feed every half hour, and your feed is like for 30 seconds, they throw your food on a rope. It's like mashed potatoes or a drink or something or goo, and you squeeze it and then you're back swimming. So you're never really talking to anybody. You're in your own head the whole time, except for those little 30-second things. But it's huge, so that's a mental really different. And then when I was in Death Valley the first time I'm in there, I was just talking to a guy in my club who's really good in the sauna. Me and him, we both stay in there a long time in the hot sauna because I think that's great for mental toughness. However long you can stay in the hot sauna and not die. Anyway, but he said he had trouble when he went to hot yoga. And I go, dude, you're so strong in here. Why would you have trouble in there? And I started thinking about it. When I did my first bad water, it was the moving around. You're out there, you're running and you're walking and you're moving in the heat, and it's different. You get mentally tough that you can move around in this heat, not just sit on your butt in a sauna. You know what I mean? That's a different, it was different. When I got in Death Valley the first time and was moving, I was like nauseous, it was unbelievable, that heat, and you're moving around. So I got more mentally tough there because instead of, I did sit in a sauna too, but I also would go down before I did anything Death Valley and be down there for a week and a half or 2 weeks, So to get used to that freaking heat and moving around in the heat. If someone feels mentally weak right now, what's the one thing they should do today? Wow. Mentally weak. Somehow for some reason, just because I've done this, man, when I'm training for Arrowhead, I would get out because you got to get used to being in your deep sleep. I would have trouble falling asleep on my feet out there. And it's not a good idea to fall asleep in your feet at Arrowhead where it's like minus 30, minus 20, minus 40 degrees. And I would fall asleep. So what I would do is I would go to sleep, set my alarm for, 2 a.m., get up at 2 a.m. and be out there pulling my tire by 2:30 and pull my tire for an hour to 2 hours to get used to being in the cold. I mean, be used to getting up in the middle of the night. If you get up in the middle of the night and you hate getting up in the middle of the night, excuse my French, it makes you mentally tough. Same with the cold, jumping in the bay, jumping in the cold water, the cold plunges, the heat, in the sauna, like I was talking about. If you can't move around, you sit in your sauna. They don't usually like you jogging too much in the sauna as somebody's over there meditating and oming and you're jogging. but the sauna, I'm telling you, the heat, that makes you mentally tough. Stay in there as long as you can. I have a rule. I'm like the safety guy at our sauna. You got to have enough energy when you leave the sauna that you can do 2 steps and a dive to hit the door to get out. That's kind of a joke. Not really. But it is. So that makes me mentally tough. And then the cold makes you mentally tough the other way. Because when you get in, I've been in San Francisco Bay. I swam for an hour at 50 degrees. That's freaking cold, man. That's like, I tried to go longer than 50. And it's like you start, you're thinking survival at that point, man. You're just trying to survive and get into shore. When you're at, the 50 minutes is like you're 50 degrees for an hour. I was done. I wasn't used to that kind of cold. So I was only mentally tough enough to do that for 1 hour. But I thought, I'm going to go for 2 hours a day. And then it wasn't happening, man. But I keep doing it. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do. It's like something makes you uncomfortable, you got to do it. If something scares you, you got to freaking do it, If you're like I was afraid of heights, I went and skydived, I went and did tandem skydiving right here. I did tandem skydiving and the guy right here. And the guy who's I'm strapped to told me, I've never had anybody as stiff as you that I was strapped to. And I was like, you were like a board. I was like a board because I thought I was going to freaking die when I jumped out of that plane. I literally had that big of fear that I thought I was going to die. And so, but you know what? When you make it and you don't, and you live, and you go back and you do it again, and it's a little bit easier the next time, and then the next time you do it, I've done it 6 times, and it's a little bit easier each time. Now I haven't done it for about 3 years or 2 years, so it'll probably get to me again for a minute or two. But the more you go for the things that scare you, and you do them, and you do them over and over and over again, and it gets easier. Like I think Alex Honnold was talking about how much he trained. Here he is right here on my wall. How much he trained to do El Cap, for free solo, where he went with no rope. And he said he trained so much with a rope that he was just, he like had every move memorized up this whole freaking climb. He had it all memorized. And so that's why he didn't have any fear come up, because he did it so many times that he was just so comfortable about it that even if something would go wrong, he still was comfortable enough that he'd done it so much, And so, so that's what he did, to do some crazy climb with no rope up freaking the side of El Cap, man. Woo! I was in Yosemite, and I got to the bottom of El Cap, and I just looked up and I go, holy crap! I go, that looks crazy without a rope. It looks crazy anyway, but 10 times crazier without a rope. Anyway, but he built his mind up so that he could frickin' do it without a rope, and that's mental toughness. It's just it's building that it's your mind, the mental, it's a mind. Your mental toughness is a muscle. I mean, it's a muscle. So you keep building it up, and you do one thing that's mentally tough this way, like say, swimming in the ocean for me, and then you're doing something hot in Death Valley, and you know what I mean. You're hitting it from all different angles. And you're just making your brain tougher and tougher and tougher. And it gets where it takes a lot to knock you out of something, man. It almost, it almost has to kill you, So because you're that tough, you can push right to the bitter end, man. And that's what that's what you want to get to, where you're so mentally tough that people are worried about you. Like Alex. I wasn't that worried. People go, oh, I went in the theater, and when I watched him, I was sweating. I go, no, I knew he lived. How could you can't sweat when you know he lived? Can't have sweaty palms when I knew he lived. But anyway, so I just believe like that mental toughness is, especially if you have a fear, man, one of your fears, just keep attacking that. But just something good is like, just go out in the middle of the night and do a little short run, man. Or I know like Jocko and Goggins, and especially Jocko, he loves that 4 a.m. stuff. He says you get up at 4 a.m. makes you tough, because nobody else wants to get up at 4 a.m. They don't want to get up at 4 a.m. So you get up. Mike Tyson did that. That was one of the reasons that Tyson, when he was training with Gus D'Amato, he would run at 4 in the morning. And they go, why'd you run at 4 in the morning? Because I knew other people were not running. None of my competitors were running at 4 a.m. in the morning. And so it was making me more mentally tough that I knew I was the one who was out there training at 4 a.m., And okay, here's the question. Were you born tough, or did you have to build it? That is definitely, I definitely was not born tough, man. I was born afraid of a lot of things. And I think that's one of the reasons I hated being afraid of everything, as a kid and stuff. And so I've been on a mission to get my brain tougher and tougher and tougher, because I hated that feeling of being afraid of everything. It's a terrible feeling. You're not going to have a big life. You're going to be afraid of everything. And that mental toughness is a muscle. If you start running, if you're one of those guys who, like I went to a Tony Robbins seminar or read his book, and I wrote down like 30 fears of mine, when I was younger, and I went after every one of them because it built mental toughness in me to go after all those fears. So that's something you could do too, is write out a list of your fears. I recommend going after the easier ones first, and then keep attacking all these things until you get all the way through that list, and you build your mind, and you're building your mental toughness muscle, man. It's a dang muscle, man. You know, the guys who I race with in Death Valley and in Arrowhead, who I've raced with, you know, and swim with, they all do it a lot. They do it a lot, and that's why they're mentally tough. They do it a lot. Okay, here's another question. What's harder, building toughness or keeping it once you have it? Oh, that's good. Because you know what? Like right now, if I went up to jump out of a skydive, and I had, like I said, I haven't done it in a couple years, I would be scared. You know, I don't know. Anyway, not sure how to spell it, but it starts with S, it ends with SS. But that's how I would be. I'd be scared, you know. I'd be so scared again, just like what I was back in the day. But you know what? Probably not quite as scared as the first time I did it. Maybe like 75%. And then it would probably go down, you know, after one jump, it would go down to like 25%. So you get it, you know, you start getting it at bay to where your mind knows we did this before and we lived. I did it 6 times and lived. And so it knows that somewhere's in there. But the very first time you do it again after you've had a long break, it's going to be tough, but not as tough as the very first time. That's what I'm going to tell you. So what's harder? It's harder to build it the first time. It's easier to get it back. So even like jumping in the bay, I was always afraid of rough water and cold water. And, you know, I didn't really learn to start to swim until I was like 30 years old, 35 actually, was when I did my first triathlon and had to really learn to swim, not just survival swimming in a pool. And so that's what I did. And but it was like you just keep getting in over and over and over and over again until you beat it. And you get a little less nervous each time, and you get a little more mentally tough each time, you know. We got a few more minutes. Has anybody got any other questions? So mental toughness, like for mountain climbing, is really hard for me, because that is one where, you know, and rock climbing, the ones where you can get serious hurt or killed, you really need a lot of mental toughness to be able to do those, you know. And, you know, and the best way to do that is practice a lot before you get on really hard mountains, really any kind of hard climb, and have, you know, guides or whatever who really know their stuff around you, you know. Okay, so how do you push through when your body says no, but your goal says yes? I like that one. I think for me, you know, and I've been in like just tons and tons of pain out there, mostly with my feet, either through trench foot at Arrowhead, or trench foot in Death Valley, or trench foot in the Grand Canyon. And yeah, everything in you wants you to quit, but you want to, I mean, I'm mentally tough. I want to finish, or I want to do the best I can do on that day. And so I'm going to push through through pain. I know I can handle a lot of pain. And, you know, I've had a doctor at Arrowhead who was looking at my feet at one of these checkpoints, and my feet were like raw. And he says, "You should quit." And I said, I think I was at mile 70 something. And I said, "Well, is your feet are a mess. You should quit. You know, there's no skin on the bottom of your feet." And anyway, and it's in my movie, Epic Bill, that scene is. And he says, "You should quit," you know. And I said, "Is that an order?" He says, "No." And I said, "Well, then let's tape them up, and I'm going to go back out there." But that's the drive I had to try to finish. And even though the pain was excruciating, and it did go down once I started moving, the pain went down, and so it wasn't as bad. But it's still tough. And so, but yeah, I really, really have a lot of drive to make these events and finish them and push through whatever obstacles are there. So anyway, I think we're wrapping up, man. Woo, woo, the lunch pail half hour is coming to an end. We had a few more technical problems today, but we're getting better. I'm getting better. I'm the IT guy. Woo, woo, that's scary. Because I also am part caveman. Woo, woo. All right, well, anyway, lunch pail half hour signing off. We're going to do it again Thursday. 3:30 Thursday. Thanks everybody for showing up. Woo woo for the lunch pail half hour, where our favorite tool is the shovel. Woo woo.